Hello again. A lot of things going on in the world today that I think that we need to discuss in this video today. One of the first things I'm going to talk about is something I had promised I would discuss in an earlier video, and it kind of slipped my mind in the process of the discussions we were having. So I am going to touch on my thoughts and views of the president today. I'm going to talk about a couple of other presidents as well to give kind of an overview perspective as to why I view the president the way I do, in a particular regard, anyways. Um, we're going to talk about the electoral college, and we're going to talk about uh, voting ages. I think since those are important subjects at hand, and then I'll try not to keep this one as long. I make no promises on that. If you are going to watch this video, I would ask that you give them a good chance, a good listen through, and I encourage comments because, especially from those of you who disagree with my views and my perspectives on the information I am presenting, I am trying to do this to start discussion, to try to get us back to where we can talk about these kind of things in a civil way, that we can disagree, and that's okay. Like, there should be no hard feelings about that. Politics are politics, but we're all people, and we should all be looking out for one another, at least to the best of our ability, um, with the understanding of separating politics from everything else, every other aspect of life. Politics is just one thing. It is an important thing, don't get me wrong, and I do feel like we need to know more about those things. So we are going to discuss those in depth and at length, uh, especially from time to time. That's the whole project I'm trying to do here. I do plan on touching on some other things as time goes on, but if you haven't been paying attention, the 2020 race has already started. Uh, there are a lot of names in the ring for the Democratic side, vying for the Democratic nomination, and a lot of ideas floating out there that I want to discuss. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So, starting off with my views of the president that we have right now, Donald J. Trump. You know from previous videos, if you've taken the time to watch them, that I have not held back on the fact that I do lean very heavily on the conservative side. And what I don't want people to think is that I have an undying loyalty to this man as a president. That doesn't mean I'm a never Trumper. That doesn't mean that I detest the man. What that means is I think that there's a difference between Donald Trump, the man, and Donald Trump, the president. Uh, I'm going to get into why I can say that here pretty soon. Um, as far as he is a person, like, do I care for who he is as a person? No. I think that he's probably pretty awful, you know, for the most part. He very self-centered, very selfish, very narcissistic in my view as a person. Not somebody I think I would want to go pal around with and maybe even share a beer with. Uh, but on the policy front, I don't think he's done too terrible, guys. I just really don't. The economy is improving, uh, and a stable economy, not artificially inflated with spikes and huge drops. It's very stable growth. And that's good. That's what we need. With that stable growth has come lower unemployment, especially for Hispanics and blacks. Those numbers are looking way better than they were. Um, you know, the tax cuts were pretty good, and a lot of people are feeding the line that the tax cuts didn't work so great for the middle class because they're not getting their tax returns back the way that they had expected and anticipated. And I think that's largely because people don't understand how tax cuts work. Um, the tax return that you get is money that you already paid in through the wages you earned through your labor, whether it be white collar or blue collar. And that taxes is used by the government to fund other projects. They're basically saying, I'm going to borrow this money and I'll give you what's left over based on the progressive tax bracket that you are in. Some don't have to pay hardly any at all, if any at all, and some have to pay a whole lot. But the ins and outs of that have been touched on in other videos, and maybe we can do another one that's a lot more in depth on that later. But the basic idea is that the tax cuts do not require you to borrow the government to borrow money to have. A stimulus package is different. Tax cuts, that's the government takes less of the money that you earn out of your paycheck. So you kept more of your money on every single paycheck for the last year, which means you paid less in taxes, which means you're not going to get as big of a return. Why? Because you kept more of your money in every single paycheck that you had. You know, it might not have been that noticeable for some. It was definitely noticeable for many. But you can't get it at both ends. The money is still got to be accounted for. You know, there's still numerical aspects to it. But the reality is, you likely kept more money from those tax cuts in every paycheck than you would have gotten in a lump sum from a tax return if you were going to get a tax return in the first place. So that's how those benefited the middle class. If you don't understand that, you're going to fall for it every time that they had to borrow this money and that. No, they took less of your money out. You kept that money to get all of the things you needed throughout the year, and because you paid less into taxes, that means your tax return is going to be smaller. That's the downside of the situation, and it's not that big of a downside when you look at it for the reality that it actually was. All right, so the border thing has been a hot topic. We've discussed that at length in another video. If you missed it, I encourage you to go listen to that one. Um, I'm not crazy about the NAFTA trade, the replacement that he had with Canada and Mexico. It doesn't seem that much different to me, honestly. Not drastic changes there or anything. Um, I think it's really a lot of the same with a different name. Um, I'm not crazy about tariffs like he has going on with China, but so far they haven't bellied up and backfired like I had anticipated them to. So we'll see how that goes. Jury's still on that one from me. I'm not jumping on. Yeah, those are great or whatever. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Typically they don't, but we'll see. I do think the border issue is going to wind up being an issue for him come re-election time. Uh, I don't think he's the most well-spoken guy. I think the Twitter thing, I'm not going to sit there and say they need to take Donald Trump off of Twitter, but you have to understand that there's a cycle with this. The media wants to sit there and talk about every single tweet the guy talks about, and then wants to complain that he's using his Twitter so much because yeah, the guy's thin-skinned. Yeah, he feels like he has to address every single perceived attack on him. He's very self-centered, like I said. So, what's the best way to deal with that? Maybe the media doesn't need to report on every single tweet. I mean, I know the guy's the president, but pick ones that are relevant to events that are going on. Policy-wise in the political realm, who cares about the stupid nonsense? That's just a tool that they can use to enrage people that aren't looking at, the aspects of what his job entails. So, you know, on policy, he hasn't done terrible. I think he's done pretty good. I think the results have been really speaking for themselves. If you take the time to look at it, you go pay attention to numbers. You can use places like CIA World Book, or you can go look at Pew Research, or a couple of those kind of sites, and you might be surprised about how well we're actually doing uh, right now. So I'd encourage you to go check that out. Um, don't care for him as a person. I think he's not doing terrible as a president, and that's pretty much where I am. Um, I definitely think he's doing better than what I what I would think that Hillary would have done, because I disagreed with many of her positions for many different reasons, some of which we have discussed. So, how can I sit there and say, let's just separate the man as a person from the man as the president? That's because as a political actor, his personal life really doesn't get in the way. And I know that's hard to accept in this climate of Me Too that we have going on today. So, let's go through a couple of really well known presidents. FDR, elected 4 times, served 3 full terms, part of his fourth, died. Vice President Harry S. Truman took over to finish out World War II and the beginnings of the Korea and Cold War. Where did FDR die? He died in I believe it was Georgia. And who was there? Well, his mistress was there when he died. Uh, there was an artist that was taking his portrait, and you can. This is easy to find. You could go look on History Channel stuff, and on this date, 1945, you know, it'll tell you that FDR had this extramarital affair. I think her last name was Mercer. Definitely wasn't Eleanor Roosevelt. So let's keep that in mind. And if that was the case today, he would be crucified in the court of public opinion. But he's renowned as the guy that brought in the New Deal, who got us through the Great Depression, who led us through World War II for the most part, especially the campaign in Europe um, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Um, he's well known for those things, and we could debate on the merits and disagreements we have on those in a different video. I'm just saying, man died with his mistress, not his wife. His wife didn't know until later. The mistress and the portrait artist left after the doctor was called, expecting his family to show up. He had died after Eleanor had been able to make plans to go see him. Uh, so, infidelitas president there. Uh, Yet, well renowned and well cheered and usually spoken highly of. Second, JFK. I have a list that I found on the internet. Super easy because he was well known for having extramarital affairs. Here's some names. JFK had affairs with Marilyn Monroe, who was an actress, Judith Campbell, also known as Judith Exner, who was the ex-wife of a mobster, Inga Arvid, who was a spy, Anita Ekberg, who was an actress, Ellen Romich, who was a call girl, Jean Tierney, who was an actress, Mimi Alford, who was a White House intern, Marlene Dietrich, who was an actress and a singer, Mary Pinchot, who was a CIA agent's ex-wife, and Priscilla Ware and Jill Cohen, who were both White House secretaries. Uh, Most of these were before and or during his presidency. Most of the time he was married to Jackie Kennedy. Um, you know, how is he remembered today? He's the guy that uh, began the policy procedures or pushing the policy for civil rights. He's known for the space race and Camelot. He's known for his assassination by Lee Harvey Oswald. Usually highly respected, highly revered. Youngest president. There were problems with his Catholicism at the time uh, in the eyes of the public, but wildly infidelitous, and yet, not the same standard. We can seem to separate the president from the man in those two famous occasions, and we've started to see a little bit of backlash on Bill Clinton, but for the most part, either you love him or you hate him because you can recognize that he did a lot of the same things with the most famous blue dress with the intern that I'm not going to name because everybody should know who it is at this point. Uh, it's not a secret. uh, All we can say is that Bill claimed to not have relations and then said that he did have relations. So, there you go. Uh, again, separate personal from man. You don't, just because you're a terrible person, you know, as in ethics and values and, personal virtue. Uh, we're all human. We all sin. Um, and nobody's perfect. Some far, far less than others. And the thing I notice about this particular president, our current president, 45, Donald J. Trump, is that there's a conflation between his personal life and his political life, and how those two things do not seem to separate. People attribute the personal with the political. And I do think that he has a hand in that blame, some, especially with the Twitter stuff. But, the president's going to do what the president's going to do. Um, if you're going to censor the president, then who aren't you going to censor? What I do think is that the news doesn't have to make a story out of every single tweet. I think it's social media. I think people need to start putting a realistic perspective on what social media is, and that the fact that even though it says social, it is vastly antisocial. All you really use it for is to confirm political biases, societal biases, and we say we keep in touch with our friends with it and stuff, but most people are just looking at memes and videos and stuff and posting those and sharing those and reposting those. It's a very small box that social media puts everybody into, and then they get all of our information, and we do that willingly. So, it's not like the days where uh, you had to wait a million years for the internet to load. You got that annoying dial tone, and you waited forever for a page to load, and the information wasn't as abundant. And you actually had to go out and talk to people face to face and do things and be active and go to concerts and institutions and establishments and go through that awkward. I don't know if I like this person, or I don't know if they like me. How do I impress them? You learn how to have a conversation with somebody instead of talking. Before we could have our phones in front of our faces all the time. There was real life. There still is real life there, guys. And just saying, we can separate that and put things into a little bit more realistic perspective. So, now that that's out of the way, I want to talk about, first of all, uh, Elizabeth Warren recently had this event on CNN and wants to create an amendment to do away with the electoral college. And what seems to be the case to me is that people don't understand why that would be a bad thing, because they want the national popular vote. They want to say, oh, well, that'll make every vote matter. And in fact, that is what she said. That'll make every single vote count. Yeah, it will, but there are a lot of problems with that, because every vote counts already, and we got to take a couple of things to break this down so that we can understand it a little bit better. The Electoral College serves a purpose. There is only one office, one, that is elected on a national level. Only one. All others are done by counties or states. And if you're done by states, you have districts. It doesn't matter if you're in the state government or the federal government. Our senators, our congressmen, they are elected by districts in the state. 2 senators for every state on the federal level. You have, depending on how many districts your state has, you have that many Congress people, because it's proportioned by population for the most part. They've stopped it at 435, so there's 435 representatives in the House, 100 senators, and none of those have to worry about the Electoral College. There's only one office that has to worry about the Electoral College. And what's the purpose for that? Well, when you're a state like Montana, who only has 3 electoral votes, I think is what it is, you're still going to want the presidential nominees to come talk to your state and explain how they're going to work for you, because you are part of the nation. If you're in Alaska, who's the largest state in the union with 3 electoral votes, they're going to want to know how you're helping them. Hawaii, 4. Hawaii is much smaller than Alaska, has 1 more electoral vote. I understand that Alaska has a lot of uninhabitable parts, and that's why that that's the number. California, 55, largest number of electoral votes. Notoriously, reliably blue state. Almost always guaranteed to go to Democrats, 55. So the state wins out at 55. That color is determined by the majority within the state. The districts make up the electoral votes. The electoral votes go to the candidate that won the state. You need 270 to win the presidency. So, okay, let's say we eliminate the electoral college. What's going to happen? Well, if you live in any of those states I just mentioned, your chances of seeing anybody running for the president went from low to none. You will never, ever see another presidential campaign come through your state, period. Why? Because you don't have enough electoral votes to make it worthwhile. That's not going to be the strategy. What's the strategy going to turn to? Well, what the national popular vote will do will make all of the major important places in the heavily populated metropolitan cities in the country. And there's just not that many of them. When you look at how large our nation is, there's a lot of rural areas and stuff. You'll never see a presidential campaign again should this happen. You will never have anybody try to worry about the concerns and the contributions of your state. All they're going to be worried about are votes, because I no longer have to worry about winning states. I just have to worry about getting enough people. So your state representation is completely gone with the electoral college being abolished. And if you don't have your state represented, why are they going to care about your particular state? It has now officially become completely national. It's already national. That's broken up with the states having an emphasis and a weight of power. California's 55 electoral votes aren't going to matter as much because you're not going to have that much of a difference over there. There still are Republican counties in California, believe it or not. Florida, 29, not going to matter. I think New York's got 23, not going to matter. Why would you give away your say as a state and the things that are important to your state specifically for a national popular vote? Not only that, how are you going to credibly account for those things? They're talking about online registration and online voting, but they're too busy sitting there worried about elections that were tampered with the equipment that we have right now. Do you really think on a personal computer they're not going to sit there and try to manipulate those numbers? That there's any kind of actual way to uniformly apply that platform? Government isn't notoriously great at stuff like that. So you're devaluing the power of your voice, the power of your vote, and the power of your state's representation by going to the national popular vote. You're actually going to do a lot more harm than good by doing that, because everybody's vote already does count. The difference is, with the Electoral College and the national voice, your state gets a say. Without the Electoral College, that won't be the case. It will be consolidated to places like Miami, New York City, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, maybe a handful of others. And that's really about it. Think about like every major NFL team. Those are probably more likely going to be the cities that get visits because that's where the most votes are going to be. Why? Because that's where the largest population centers are. And it's not going to matter about states. I don't have to worry about, you know, the red algae problem in Florida. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to provide better education in Montana, how I'm going to protect the gun rights in Montana, and how I'm going to uh, apply federalism in a proper and legal manner when it pertains to state rights and the state level governments. It's just one more step towards centralized government, and centralized government does not have a good history, guys. It just doesn't. It takes away your rights in a very large, diminishing way. It takes away your freedoms in a very large, diminishing way. So, you just got to keep this in mind. If you don't believe me, there's more than enough information out there for you to be able to understand that that is true. So electoral college should stay for sure. It is actually important, especially for the office of president. This last election was not the first time that the popular vote uh, did not elect the electoral vote. Um, George W. Bush happened, and then there were some other ones in history. I can't remember them off the top of my head. I can look them up and try to have them for you in a later video. But I think it's happened about three times before this throughout our history. And we've only had 45 presidents, so it's not hard to find, even if you want to go out and look for it yourself. Yes, this has happened before, where the Electoral College elected the person that did not have the popular vote. Um, Not a new thing, guys. It's You just got to understand how the government works and why it's there. It's actually pretty important. There were a lot of debates on this, even from the founding. If you want to know anything about that, the copies of the Federalist Papers are fairly easy to come by. So there's that. Uh, so there's a lot of talk about lowering the voting age to 16 so that our youth can participate and have their voices heard in our democracy. This is a terrible idea. Uh, they don't care about the government. I'm telling you right now, guys. Kids that age do not care about the government. When you were in high school, how much did you care about American government class? Maybe a handful of you were like super serious about it. Most of you guys are just getting through it because, in most places it's required class. Civic education is important, but most people do it as little as possible in that particular frontier, which is why people don't really know how the government works today. Um, and if you don't believe that, there's an abundance of videos that display how little the American public actually knows about how their country is governed and how their government system works. So, uh, we want to interject people that have no interest in it whatsoever to vote against things that they don't understand at all because they don't pay attention to them whatsoever. And that's just a bad idea. I'm more in favor of raising the age to vote to 21. I know it's at 18 and that is whatever, but there's a lot to be said about, we want to, the same people that are sitting there saying we want to lower the voting age to 16 are the same people that are saying you're not responsible enough to have a gun until you're 21. Or you're not responsible enough to have certain guns at all, period, regardless of your age. But, you're responsible enough to make decisions that are going to impact the nation at 16. I don't see that at all. Um, you're asking us to let the same people that are jumping out of their cars to dance to some rap song and, face planting into poles and chasing after their cars and tripping over themselves for a social media challenge to vote. You're asking people that were literally eating detergent pods to vote. You're trying to say that they're responsible enough at that age to vote, but we're hating on other things like, you know, learning how to defend yourself and home protection and proper usage of something that could save your life one day. That's a debate to have. I'm just saying, the logic doesn't make sense. It's not very evenly applied. It sounds a lot like to me uh, a ploy to get easily gullible people to vote a particular way based on narratives that sound good. Because that's all it's going to take with kids that are 16. If it sounds good, they're going to go, oh yeah, and they're not going to know anything about it. And then that's going to be bad. So, I want more people to vote, but I want people to be educated about what they're voting for. I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. I don't care where your political ideology leanings are. I care that you know why they're there and what you believe in and why you want to pursue that particular candidate for those reasons. I want to be able to have a discussion with somebody. I'm not so worried about somebody whose primary concern is legalizing pot. It just not the biggest issue on my mind. I really could care less about that issue, honestly. There are way bigger fish to fry than that. So I'm going to leave it here for now. There are a couple of things I wanted to talk about. I think I'm going to save those for a different one. If you did actually listen to this full one this time, I appreciate you taking that time. Um, I would encourage you to maybe go view the other videos I have. Feel free to have some discussions. I'm checking these as regularly as I can. I would like to get the conversation going. Uh, I'm not some big upstart or anything. I'm not trying to be that new media competitor. I'm just a dude trying to talk to the rest of the country. These are my ideas. They are uh, within the realm of possibility of being changed depending on the debate. Well, we can talk about those issues, why we believe those issues, what the differences are, how we can come to terms with it, and maybe start pushing this country towards learning how to be more diplomatic with each other, even when we disagree with each other. How to not feel the need to hate somebody you disagree with on this political issue. Uh, I believe people on both sides of the aisle generally do have a fondness for America. I think that there are some that do not. I think that there's a lot of lack of education on simple, basic things that are actually really big deals if they wind up getting implemented into policy. And we've talked about some of this. We've talked about socialism. We've talked about uh, national sovereignty. We've talked about human trafficking. We've talked about drug trafficking. We've talked about the dangers of not being able to uh, enforce the laws you have as a country. We've talked about some of those things in some of these videos, and if you haven't watched them, you really kind of cheated yourself out of those discussions. I know a couple times I've been more of a stream of consciousness. I tried to have a little bit more of an idea of what I was going to directly talk about on this one, so I'm hoping I didn't miss anything, and I'm hoping that I've covered all the bases on the other videos that I've had for all of my promises and discussions to be actually spoken on. If I did miss any and you actually watch all the videos, please point them out to me, and I will definitely make it a point to discuss those um, for future videos. And I will start to try to make sure these are a little bit more organized. I know I wasn't super comfortable at first. I'm still not 100% comfortable being on camera and doing stuff, but this is personally important to me. I'm not looking to be a big shot or anything. I'm just looking to be one American citizen to all of you. whether it be few or many, you know, let's uh, let's just start the conversation. I think it's important. Thanks for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.